You and me.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. This has been a very big week for media addiction, and I mean that in a variety of ways. The United States has decisively elected our next president, a man who routinely gives out false information, both in live interviews and through a social media platform that he owns. More than 72.5 million people who voted for him were either unaware of or untroubled by this fact, a situation that has profound consequences for our society, our communities, and for our children. For tonight's edition of Mama, for tonight's edition of Mama's Expert Insight series, I'm delighted to bring you a conversation with a legal scholar who knows quite a bit about media addiction and the role that law plays or can potentially play in protecting humans online in terms of our privacy and safety. And why, despite this being perhaps the most critical issue of our time, most people know so little about the legislation that's pending or have an incorrect idea about what it is. Please join me in welcoming Gaia Bernstein, who is a law professor at the Seton Hall University School of Law. Gaia is the founding director of the Institute for Privacy Protection and the co-director of the Gibbons Institute of Law, Science, and Technology. She's a renowned tech policy expert specializing in addictive technologies and social media regulation, and she also has an academic degree in psychology. Gaia is the award-winning author of the book Unwired: Gaining Control Over Addictive Technologies, which Kirkus Reviews said sets an agenda to rein in the tech behemoths that have run rampant for years. Gaia has spoken about technology policy all around the world, from the TEDx stage, including her recent TEDx talk, Should Big Tech Be Held Responsible for Screen Time?, to the World Economic Forum. And she's also the mother of 3 children who grew up in a world of smartphones, iPads, and social networks. Gaia, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, the focus of tonight's conversation will be the Kids Online Safety Act, which is known as KOSA. But before we get into all the legal weeds, let's start with your kids. How old are they, and when did you begin noticing the effects of technology in their lives?
So I have 3 kids. The oldest is 22, and I have twins who are 17. And I would say my oldest kid, we just gave him a phone. Nobody was thinking about it at the time. But when my twins were maybe about 9 or 10, I started to notice life changing around them. I would attend birthday parties, and suddenly the kids were not playing with each other. Instead, they were sitting in a row looking at their phones. Or I would attend school performances, but I could not see the performance because my view was blocked by rows of phones held to take videos. So, and I also noticed that my life was changing. I'm an academic, and I would go to a coffee shop and I would try to work, and I would get out my iPad, my Kindle, my computer, my phone, and 2, 3 hours later, I was doing nothing. All I did was send texts and emails and look at blogs, which were what people did at the time. And I understood that something has happened here.
Had the media always been the focus of your legal work, or sort of how did that come together?
So my research was different than most law professors who work on technology, because most law professors would look at what makes us invent, copyrights, patents, and I was always interested in how people use technology and how it affects their life and what role the law has or does not have. So that led me in many different directions. I looked into reproductive technologies, genetics. I did, of course, study the internet. I studied how parents overparent their kids using technology. And I got to this later on, around 2016, when, as I said, I started to notice things happening, and I became the director of the Institute for Privacy Protection in my law school. And I decided to start a program. And the idea was to send my students to schools to talk to kids who just got their first cell phone, 5th graders or 6th graders. And I spoke to parents. And I would, at that point, it was beginning of 2017, I really believed that if people will just realize that there's a problem, that we are spending too much time on our screens, then the problem will be resolved. And through that year, lots of whistleblowers came out. It became a hot media topic, and nothing has really changed. And
Well, so I mean, there's a reason for that, which we're going to get to. In your book, Unwired, Gaining Control Over Addictive Technologies, you wrote about how traditional industries rely on tangible materials. The automobile industry, for example, uses iron, aluminum, glass, and other physical resources. In recent years, we've seen a shift in industries towards using more intangible resources, things like patents or information. What would you say is the primary resource used by the social media industry?
we are us. We are the resources. That's how the business model that's been dominant in the internet and became even more dominant since social media works. Basically, we get our products for free. So we get Facebook for free, Instagram for free, Snapchat for free, but we pay. We pay with our data and with our time. So companies make money through selling ads. In order to sell targeted ads of products you would really want to buy, they need to collect information on us. But in order to collect information on us, they need us online for as long as possible. Then again, they need us online for as long as possible, so we will see the ads. So that's why we are the resource, our data and our time.
And you mentioned that you thought if we could just educate parents about how these things work, we wouldn't have a problem. Similarly, when I first started thinking about the problem and how to solve it, I also thought that making people aware of the way media work could, be a solution. I came to see that wasn't possible. It sounds like you did too. Why didn't that work?
I think it didn't work because we lost our autonomy over our decision making. Tech companies who needed to get our time because it was their resource and it was crucial for their revenues, needed to make sure we stay online. In order to do that, they needed to use addictive design features. And some of them, I'm sure people have noticed or read about, like the infinite scroll. If you go on Facebook or on Instagram, there's never an end to a page. Our stopping cues are taken away from us. The same, if you go on YouTube, there's autoplay. One video chases another. TikTok, same thing. So that's one mechanism, taking our stopping cues away. Another very dominant one is using the neurotransmitter dopamine by using the same model that is used in gambling for slot machines. So how does a slot machine work? The idea is that you press and you press, and once in a while you get money. And when you don't know when you're going to get money, then you get more of this neurotransmitter dopamine, which enhances your sense of pleasure. Same thing all over social media and the internet, whether it's the comments or the like or the pings and the notifications. We don't, or if you go dating, when you match with someone, you never know when you're going to get it. So it's always in an irregular basis, and that's what keeps us, and especially our kids, online for longer.
It's using human psychology in the design of the products, and humans are wired in a certain way that will never change. Back in 2022, just before your book came out, you published a really interesting research paper about what you called windows of opportunity to regulate addictive technology. What did you mean by a window of opportunity?
So when you want to regulate technologies, you have a few options. You can do what is done, for example, with some medical technologies, with drugs. You decide in advance whether you're going to allow them, how they're going to be used, or when the technology comes into the market, you can decide to regulate it right away, or you can say, let's wait and see and regulate it later. And what happened with our screens and our social media and our smartphones was that we didn't really notice what was happening. We were spending more and more time online. By the time we realized that there was a problem, which I would say was around 2017, when whistleblowers like Tristan Harris came out and then additional ones came out as well, at that point, social norms changed. We were used already to being on our screens all the time, to have our smartphones with us all the time, to communicate via texting, and also business interests were entrenched. This whole industry was based on getting our time. So in a way, by the time we understood there was a problem, we missed the window of opportunity to do that. But the reason I wrote that article is that I felt that with a pandemic, a new one opened. Because what happened during the pandemic, we spent so much time on screens, we noticed what it meant to have a life on screens. We felt our bodies, we felt our spirits changing, we realized what we missed, and we didn't want it anymore. I mean, students didn't want to study online, they wanted to go to classes. So there was an opening which coincided with lots of research coming out showing the harms, especially for kids, of being online for so long. And I think that's why we saw so much change following the pandemic.
You know, the story I heard about what happened during the pandemic that most impressed upon me was a group of infants and toddlers in the UK whose parents had to work during the pandemic and they didn't have childcare, and they had, you know, provided screens to their children and they were watching them 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day. And these children who had begun to acquire language, who had begun to make eye contact and relate, they all suffered regressions. Some of them lost the ability to make eye contact, some of them lost the ability to verbalize. And despite, you know, intense interventions, there were some children who recovered what they lost, but some could never recover it. And I know now there's a lot more work being done to understand how screens affect infant development, which is something that we weren't even talking about before the pandemic.
Right, it's there's lots of research showing the impact on cognitive development. Not just, this is obviously an extreme scenario, but just kids who get excessive exposure. And we're not just talking about infants. The study shows the impact on kids all the way to 18. And you can see the difference in their brain images between kids who are exposed to excessive screen time versus those who are not.
And, you know, the brain scans, if we did adults, I'm sure we'd see some things too. Back to your book for a second, you know, you argued that in terms of the law, technology overuse is sort of a novel problem, but that battles between corporations and activists who are seeking to protect the public from harmful products have happened many times before. Which industries do you see as comparable to what activists like myself are fighting against in terms of the social media industry?
Well, unfortunately, there are too many of them. In my book, I chose to focus on some. I chose to focus on the tobacco industry because there's so much history and there was so much to learn from it. And also, it's interesting that despite the fact that we know that cigarettes are so vile, it still took so long to fix the problem, or to at least reduce the harm. And I also looked at food, which I thought was an interesting example because junk food also causes harm in terms of obesity, related health problems. But it's an interesting parallel to technology because food is not all bad. It's good and bad mixed. So I wanted to look at it. And I think it also introduced more issues which we are seeing now with tech, like the First Amendment. We saw a lot with the junk food fights.
According to Issue One, which is a nonpartisan organization in DC, big tech lobby arm spent $51 million this year and $30 million last year trying to stop a bill that we're going to be talking about shortly. So, do you think there really is a legal remedy to the harms of media addiction? Is why are they fighting so hard here?
I think that there is a legal remedy, but it's not one thing. From my studying of the battles against cigarettes and against food, it's always multiple solutions happening at the same time. And I'm encouraged because we're already seeing this happening. There is a movement already taking place. And what's interesting about it, it's both a grassroots movement, like Mama Organization, like the Phone Free Childhood in the UK, and Parents Uniting, and at the same time, it's a legal and political movement. So we are seeing bills and laws. I think it's impossible to count at this point how many bills and laws have been introduced in the last year and a half, both in states and federally. And we are also seeing class actions. We are seeing parents whose kids were harmed by social media or lost their whole life being addicted to games, suing. We are seeing the school districts suing social media companies for the harms they're paying for, because they're paying for their mental health harms that kids are suffering from because of social media. We're seeing attorneys general suing. So that's one thing. We're seeing the Surgeon General issuing an advisory that we need to have warnings about social media. We're seeing the FTC now meeting to hold a workshop about the harms of the attention grabbing. So, and I think it will be all of these together that will make a difference. It will not be one thing.
So, can you tell us? I don't know everyone who's here watching tonight, but can you just give us a quick overview of what federal laws currently govern social media? What regulation do we have right now?
It's more what we don't have. We are sort of stuck, we're stuck in sometime between 1998 to 2002. When the internet came about, it was this excitement. This is this new thing, information for everyone, innovation. We should not regulate this new creature because this is what's going to change society for the better. So we have some laws there, like Section 230, which protects information hosts. Like now we have Facebook, then we had others, from liability of people putting materials there in case somebody sues for defamation or for copyright. We have these laws, and we have a very old law, KOPA from 1998, to protect kids online, which is completely irrelevant to what's going on. We have lots of issues that have happened since. The internet has proven, yes, there are a lot of advantages, but lots of not so good things are happening. Fake information, videos which deep fake videos showing politicians, celebrities, or regular peoples in situations they've never been, things they've never said. We have online overuse, as we've just been discussing, privacy issues. Masses of information about us is collected. We have some laws for that, but we don't have a federal law for that. So there's so much work to be done. And I think, we're living in this split universe where, especially if we think about children, kids have so much protection in the physical world. Kids cannot buy cigarettes, kids cannot drink, they cannot drive cars. But online, it's a different world. Everything is open because of this early vision of the internet.
In the United States, we've been regulating mass media since the 1930s. And I've always sort of wondered why we don't regulate social media like it's publishing, because everybody who posts a social media post is effectively a mass media publisher. Has that argument been raised at all?
No, I think the whole thing from the beginning was that they're not publishers because everybody can now publish. So the hosts, the websites or that host information should not be treated as publishers because this will block all this innovation of people publishing. And so that's I think how we got here, why we have exactly the distinction that you're describing.
So that brings us to KOSA, or the Kids Online Safety Act. Could you take a moment and explain to us all, what KOSA is, what it says, or at least what the Senate version of the bill said?
Okay, so KOSA is a bill that is designed to regulate online platform, which includes social media, but also games and messaging applications, and it's designed to protect kids. And the hallmark of KOSA is that it imposes a duty of care on these online providers like social media, which means that they have to act with reasonable care when they use certain designs. And some of these designs are the designs I just described. They're actually mentioned in KOSA, like the infinite scroll or notifications designs, which are known to keep us online, but it's an open list. More could be added there. So it basically the idea that they're responsible for taking reasonable care not to use these designs in a way which will cause harms to kids, especially mental harms or addiction. These are the main harms. And we know why this is there, because there have been so many reports on the huge increase in mental harms to kids, doubling of depression in 10 years. So that's one important part of KOSA. Another important part is it also prohibits design features which cause compulsive use. Compulsive use is defined as any kind of repetitive use that causes psychological distress. This is there because we know that kids spend at least 9 hours on their screens a day. So it's there to prevent that. The other features of KOSA, I won't go into all of them. It also gives parents some rights to control because some parents feel that their kids need more protections. But really, these are the main things that I would focus on.
So in the Senate, KOSA had 72 co-sponsors, and then it passed in July 91-3 with tripartisan support, which was kind of remarkable given how much division there is in the United States. So what happened to this bill when it went over to the House?
So when it went over to the House, it got delayed, and eventually it was introduced out of the committee, but in a very diluted way. There were many changes, but two of the changes go exactly to the heart of KOSA. So this duty of care, which in the original Senate bill was supposed to protect kids from harms related to mental health and addiction, became limited only to physical harms like physical violence or drugs, but not really what we were worried about this whole time. Another important change, they changed the definition of what compulsive use is. So it's no longer about repetitive use that causes a psychological distress. It's now about use that causes an impairment in a major area of life, like walking or working. We're talking about categories which are mentioned in the American Disabilities Act. So again, making it a very physical thing. So why was KOSA enacted? KOSA was enacted to solve the problem of the kid who is working, is online all night, not getting much sleep, then going to school, but still functioning. This version will not help this kid. This version also does not take into account all the mental harm that kids have suffered, and which research showed that is related to social media use. So it's
And the
unclear.
addiction and the addiction. I mean,
Yeah.
we know it's addiction, and we know it's addiction because that's what the company's own documents say, right? For example, the attorneys general who recently filed a lawsuit against TikTok, when some of those documents came out, TikTok had its own report, its own measure of exactly how many videos before a person would become what they considered addicted to TikTok. They would compulsively need to check it. So, we know that even the platforms themselves have an awareness of, what their designs do. What else were you concerned about in terms of the changes that happened in the markup over in the House?
I think there were lots of small changes. These were the big markups. I was also concerned that it was just held up. Speaker Johnson saying that this is a problematic law, and the fact that it got such huge bipartisan support, to think that this would not fly through the House was extremely concerning to me.
You also have a new paper coming out very soon about one of the main reasons it's been so hard to pass these bills, which is because of how the tech industry has really hijacked the debate to focus on the First Amendment. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes, so basically what we are seeing here, so obviously KOSA has not passed yet, but many states have bills and laws, and some of these laws were actually passed. And the moment that any law passes, we see the representative of the tech companies suing, saying that these laws, whatever they do, whether they prohibit addictive features, or they ban kids from social media, or they require companies to issue reports about the harms, anything violates the First Amendment. Now, and we fully expect that if KOSA passes, there will be an immediate First Amendment lawsuit. Now, it's really important to emphasize that the First Amendment is there to protect content. And what basically the tech companies are trying to argue here is that their designs, their addictive designs, the infinite scroll, the never having an end to a page, the autoplay, this is protected speech. This is such an extension of what we think that speech protected under the First Amendment should be. And so we're seeing them doing it again and again. And even if a certain feature does not is considered to be under the First Amendment, you would not expect it to get very high protection. You would usually get what we call intermediate scrutiny, and then the laws probably pass. Now we're seeing decisions going both ways. We don't know where this is going to head. My guess is this is going to get to the Supreme Court eventually.
I certainly don't think that an addictive design is the same as free speech. I wrote an opinion piece about this that was just shared in the chat. The legal scholar John Woo also wrote a piece in the Atlantic, who, saying that there was a judge in California who granted a stay on the implementation of the kids code in California, which, similar to KOSA, would establish a duty of care to make sure that platforms were designed in a way that was safe for children. And, the tech lobby sued and said, that's a violation of our free speech. And a judge said, well, okay, so we'll delay, we'll hear the case and we'll delay the implementation of that bill. Another reason that this has become such a complicating thing, in my opinion, is that that idea that not allowing things that are inaccurate is a censorship, having come from journalism where, we worked endlessly and spent many hours with lawyers working hard to make sure we never libeled anyone. It's kind of shocking to me that people could just sort of print anything that's untrue, no matter the consequences, with no ramifications. So, who do you see sort of behind this heightening of concern about First Amendment issues when it comes to regulating tech online?
Well, I think this is the tech companies cannot afford to lose this. If our time is their resources and they cannot keep us online, because especially kids, I mean, they make so much money from kids. I think there was a study from Harvard that came out recently, which showed that they make, I think, $11 billion a year just from kids. So if these laws restrict how much time they can have kids online, they lose a lot of money. And the truth is, I think, and that at the end, when you have these restrictions enforced, at the end, we're very likely to see that they will protect adults as well, which will really put their entire business model at risk of crumbling. And so they'll do anything to delay this, at least to gain a few more years of this through litigation, because there's so much money at stake.
You wrote this op-ed for The Hill about this issue, and the headline very directly said, "Why is the House caving to tech lobbyists instead of protecting children?" Another person who agrees with you is Senator Marsha Blackburn, who actually issued a memo on her website entitled "Rebuttal to Big Tech's Lies About the Kids Online Safety Act." I thought that was really interesting. How do you see the election affecting progress on KOSA this session and also on tech policy generally?
Well, first of all, I hope that the bipartisan support that pushed this through will go forward. And I think there are enough people in the House that believe in that, because many of us are parents and parents see what's happening to the kids. So I hope that we're going to see progress going forward and past this year. I believe it will go forward as well if we have to start again. But of course, starting again means more revisions, more delay. And we have to think what's at stake here. We have a generation of kids who already spent a decade in front of screens. We don't really have the luxury of time to wait for this. And these kids are already in college. I mean, some of them aren't even my students in law school. I really think that we have a momentum going, and I hope that this could be passed this year.
I certainly do too. Keeping kids safe is obviously deeply important to me. But another reason I want to see social media platforms become accountable is that I care deeply about the public getting access to quality information. During my time in newsrooms, my colleagues and I worked tirelessly to fact check everything. Of course, we sometimes made mistakes because we're human, but for decades, there have been laws preventing publishers from libel. Social media now has created a space where the truth is blurred and everyone sees different realities. What do you think about that?
I've been thinking a lot about this since the elections, because of course there are lots of explanations of what happened, but I'm sure that one of the things that caused the surprise, how Democrats were caught by surprise, is that we're each in our isolated world seeing different information, and the information that people who are likely to vote would have voted for Kamala Harris was very different from that of people who would have voted for Trump. And I think, and the reason we're seeing such different information is one of the main addictive features that we didn't talk about yet is the algorithm, which is designed to show us information that we would want to see. We would like to see information that sort of agrees with what we think. In addition, they've found out that if you're angry and if the information is hateful, you will stay online for longer. So, which shows you how important it is to have a legislation that will prohibit these kinds of features, because if not, we'll grow further and further apart from each other. And we're already seeing how divided the country is right now. So for me, that's after the election, I feel even more convinced about how this work is important.
I feel the same way. In a minute, we're going to take audience questions. So if anyone has questions out there, you're welcome to begin putting them into the Q&A. But before we do that, I also wonder your thoughts on sort of other things that maybe have made it so difficult or have slowed the momentum getting lawmakers to put regulations in place. I know one of the things you mentioned in the book that's certainly a concern at Mama is how for so long we had government policy that actually promoted the agenda of maximizing technology in the classroom. Schools today even sort of brag about their one-to-one technology resources for children when reports keep coming out showing that the use of technology in the classroom actually doesn't result in measurable improvements in reading and math. Are there, this idea that we celebrate innovation all the time because we think every time a technology is new that it's automatically promoting progress. How do you think that fits into the equation?
Well, I think we're a bit split about this because as a society, we do believe that innovation will promote progress. And even parents, when they believe that their kids need technology in order to succeed in life. So the idea that you will not maximize technology in the classroom is difficult for parents or for the system to understand. And technology companies took advantage of this situation by basically pushing more and more ed tech into the classroom. And the idea was that the more the better. There was no thinking about what's good, what's not good. Is it good to write a first draft on paper versus a computer? It's probably good to study coding on a computer, but there was no granular thinking about what should be done. And that was another area in which tech companies kept pushing. And if you think also what happened during the pandemic, which is still happening, when teachers took advantage of social media, started posting stuff because that's where the kids will look. So I think tech companies sort of took advantage in our belief in innovation, and also they were pretending to be the good doers. If you think about it, Google's motto was do no evil, and Facebook was connect the world. So it's hard to shift gears and to understand that something else is happening. Plus, we don't see this. I mean, I know about all these features, but I forget. And here I am once again, wasting time. It's very, very difficult for us to keep it all in our mind. It's against our instinct, and they are taking advantage of our vulnerabilities.
The word you used in your book that I really liked was about the notion of the invisibility of digital technology and the way, there was just such rapid entrenchment of these tech products into our social habits, our norms, business interests. And there was so much resistance to any kind of information. I hope the work we do at Mama and the work that other organizations have been doing has helped try to make tech products more visible and the design choices of tech products more visible. What else do you think we could do, or what else do you think parents should know about how these products work that maybe are not immediately obvious?
Well, I think one very important thing to do is to put ratings. If you think about it, I think parents would never download an addictive game for kids. But Minecraft, which was voted as the most addictive game of all time, was promoted as an educational game. So if you think about if you would and if we have ratings now, we have ratings for violence, for age, but there's no rating for addictiveness. And I think that if we had these kinds of ratings, companies would change these features because nobody would buy the games. So I think that's another thing to think about, and it keeps people aware of the issue. And including also the warnings that the Surgeon General recommend for social media, having, and it's not that I believe, I want to make clear, I don't believe that awareness will solve the problem. I think it's only part of what we need to see. We need to have regulations. We need to have to put the liability on tech companies. One of the things that worries me is the tech companies, of course, prefer to avoid all regulation, but if they couldn't avoid all regulations, they would like regulation to put the responsibility on parents. And that's the oldest game in the book. Companies have been doing this for years. Tobacco companies did that when they were sued by smokers for the health problems. They said, well, you chose to smoke, it's your responsibility. This is what tech companies would do, and they've been doing it already with parental controls, making them complicated to use. And they would, if they could not avoid this regulation, they would have regulation making sure parents get tools, knowing that it's very difficult for parents to implement these tools. So I think it's really, really important, if we want protections, to put liability first on tech companies. You could have additional tools for parents, but don't put the full responsibility on parents, because it will just be a way for tech companies to avoid responsibility and to avoid change.
Well, you have said that you want parents to know that we're not failing because we're bad at self-control. We're failing because the tools tech companies give us are not created to help us succeed. What would you like to see happen?
I would like to, parents blame themselves so much. That was the reason I wrote my book. I felt how parents feel helpless, how they blame themselves, they blame their kids, they blame everybody but the tech companies. I think instead of feeling guilty, people should be angry at what was done to them. Because not only did the tech companies take our kids' childhood, they also took away our rights to be parents, to sort of navigate our kids' life. It's impossible to drag the kids away from the screens. So what I would hope that parents would do is to turn this anger into action, to join organizations like BAMA and other grassroots organizations to bring about change, to support these legislations which are sprouting everywhere.
So we have a couple of questions that have come in. One came in from a retired federal law enforcement officer. This person says, I have seen the easy access that kids have to criminal elements online on all social media, things like drugs, human trafficking. Is there any legislation being introduced to hold tech companies accountable for their content in terms of crime? It's my experience that if tech companies find this content, which isn't very often, they simply delete it and do not forward it to law enforcement, although there are a few exceptions.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think so. There was an effort to pass a law to protect kids from pornographic sites, and this has also been barred by First Amendment claims. Now, I think the big issue here is age verification. So the reason that it's so hard to protect kids online is that tech companies are saying that age verification is a problem. It violates the First Amendment rights and violates everybody's privacy, because everybody would have to tell tech companies what their age is, to give identity documents. Now, this is so absurd from so many reasons. First of all, to hear tech companies talking about privacy when they have so much information about us is hard to believe. Secondly, they know the age of the kids. Everybody knows the ages because everybody collects information. So then that's how they target ads. So definitely you could protect kids. So I think age verification, also we're getting much more complicated system. To say we cannot do age verification in a private way is not true. You can do it through third-party systems. It's just a matter of wanting to do it. So basically, the answer for why we don't protect kids, the reason is this argument about age verification.
So there's arguments about age verification, there's arguments about free speech, all of these things that are really not what it's actually about, right?
Exactly. It's exactly not what it's about.
So I love the idea of there being ratings to help us with certain things. I also wonder who would be doing the ratings. Right now in the App Store, it shows ratings on different apps, but I certainly, as a parent, approved apps for my children that I have later discovered had content that I would not consider age appropriate. So there is the question about who makes those ratings and what kind of transparency is available to parents to find out what goes into those ratings. There's also the issue of the products themselves. For example, on the iPhone, I use Screen Time, which is a parent control that they offer. It doesn't seem to always work very well. It allows 1-minute overrides and other things, but also, even though they know my child's age, when my child was 12, in the App Store, they were still promoting apps to him that were 17 plus or 15 plus or whatever. So what is your thought about putting controls onto devices as well as on, the products themselves, in addition to the platforms?
I think putting controls on devices is fine. I think it works fine when you have a small child, but when the child grows older, you can't really control it. The kids are much more sophisticated than adults, and they're going to change the controls no matter what you do. I mean, look, we have a long history with parental controls. They did not work for several reasons. One reason is the complexity, the fact that they're always changing, which parents find exhausting. The fact that kids keep begging parents to change the settings. At a certain point, you're just tired of giving another 10 minutes and 10 minutes. You give them the whole evening, then you just take it off altogether. And, parents don't want to isolate their kids. So unless norms significantly change, which I hope they do, it's very difficult for a parent to say, no, I'm giving you a phone, but you're not on social media, because all their friends are.
I mean, at Mama, that's baked into our reason for being. We have a 3-part mission to start, which is parent education, getting phones out of schools, and demanding safeguards. But at the heart of our work is the desire to build a world where real life experiences and interaction remain at the heart of healthy childhood. So we're always encouraging parents to delay, delay, delay. We're working hard to get phones out of schools and just ensuring that kids can grow up in the real world with plenty of time and experiences to develop all the basic building blocks they need to be healthy emotionally, socially, and academically. Sorry, do you want to say more about that?
No, I think this is so important. That shows how multifaceted the solution is. So yes, it would be good to have control on devices, but if norms don't change, it will be very difficult to implement. And yet, no, you still cannot not have controls over the content providers. It all has to come together. And that's why I think it's so important to look at this movement as a whole.
So just a few more questions for you, and then we'll all go back to getting our kids ready and all the things we have to do on a school night. How do we navigate the conversation around the First Amendment of kids and keeping kids safe? And do kids have First Amendment rights like adults do? Is that something that we should be talking about?
Well, I think the problem is that the way that the argument is made, it's not about the kids. Well, there are two parts. One is the First Amendment argument for the companies, which is different. And then there is the issue of the kids. But I think usually when this comes up, it's about banning them from social media or putting parents' consent. And it's often expressed more in terms of privacy of kids against their parents, which is a very complicated area. kids don't have much privacy rights. So I don't think these are very well defined issues right now.
And is there legislation addressing trying to get tech companies to control or change or do away with the algorithms that they are using and control? I mean, for example, just today, there was an announcement out of Australia about the possibility of completely banning social media there for everyone under 16, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
But this question is sort of about the idea of, is there anything at work trying to completely ban the algorithms that social media companies use here?
So I think some of these laws actually prohibit using addictive algorithms, saying you have to use chronological algorithm, showing the post as they come along. And New York has a law which does not ban algorithm, but says that social media companies have to use, the default has to be no addictive algorithm. And then if the parent will agree, it could be changed to an addictive algorithm. I cannot imagine. I think this is actually an interesting experiment. It's very narrow. I cannot imagine a kid begging their parents to put the addictive algorithm back. I cannot imagine a parent doing that. So that's the New York experiment is very different from all the other states. It just went after one thing, actually notifications as well, but this is the main thing.
Great. So, what might be the most important question of the night for all of us who are here, what can parents do now to help KOSA pass and try and get it past this session?
I think to contact your house representatives and tell them how important it is. This is the main thing, and do it as soon as possible because the house is going to reconvene on the 12th.
I think that's excellent advice. And at Mama, we're going to be launching a new chapter very soon, next week in Louisiana, because we know a lawmaker there has publicly said that he does not support the bill, which I don't quite understand, although a report from Bloomberg says that he is the person in the House who has accepted the most donations from the tech industry in his congressional career, which may or may not have something to do with it. I don't know. What should parents do if KOSA doesn't get past this session?
I think they will have to, as you will go back to the Senate, and we'll have to start. And again, contact your representative in the Senate and the House and ask them to pass it.
So one more, sorry, the questions are all coming in. So someone just wanted to express agreement with the idea of no social media under 16. The kids don't need it. I agree with that. And what are your thoughts about the Kids Off Social Media Act? Have you heard of this one?
No, I haven't. What is it?
It's I don't know all the details of that one. I'm trying to remember because they all begin to blend together. So I don't
Is
know. It's the Kids Off Social Media Act. That'll be a good project for us all to sort of look that one up.
Right, and I think there are hundreds of bills coming through, so I'll definitely check it out. But it's a good name.
It is, it is a good name. Someone anonymously put in this idea that maybe the reason New York has that option, or why this, sorry, the reason New York has that option is because parents might accidentally click that option to go into the, addictive feed just by accident. I mean, negative default options have been a controversial legal issue for a long time, right? Like a lot of phone companies have these sort of negative options where you're automatically billed for something and you have to go in and affirmatively ask for it to be removed. So I think the experiment in New York is interesting. So Mama's team just dropped the bill into the chat, the Kids Off Social Media Act. So everybody's welcome to take that link and have a look at it. Gaia, I can't thank you enough for coming tonight. I hope everyone in the audience will go out and buy Gaia's book. It is really a terrific roadmap for all of us to understand what needs to happen legally to protect our kids online. I love that you said we should all sort of work together to avoid a dystopian and lonely future, which I think is what the real result of all of this screen time addiction and social media has been. So thank you for joining us tonight, everyone. Please visit us at joinmama.org and sign up for our newsletter so you get our updates. And for anyone who wants to support our work, we welcome your donations, as we are a nonprofit, and it's thanks to our generous donors that we're allowed to run this program and do all the work that we do. Gaia, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great talking to you.
You too. Appreciate it. Good night, everyone. Let's get this KOSA passed this session.